If you're a B2B business, a B2B tech company, or a B2B marketer, you're in the right place. Coming to you from Studio 26, this is the Interesting B2B Marketers podcast, bringing you interesting contemporary takes, industry tips, guest interviews, and true stories from B2B marketers in the trenches. Now, here's your host, Steve Goldhaber.
Hey, everybody. Welcome back to Studio 26 and the Interesting B2B Marketers podcast. Today, I am super excited to have Mark on the show. Mark, welcome.
Yeah. Hey, happy to be here, Steve. Really excited.
All right, cool. Give us a quick background. So give us the 60-second version of who you are and what you've been up to.
60 seconds. All right. Salesperson turned business builder who figured out that, marketing's kind of important. And I have a left...
Don't be too serious. Kind of
important. So
Yeah.
I have a left brain, right brain thing going on. I started programming when I was 12 years old. I'm old enough to have discovered my school's Apple II. So that puts in
Nice.
context. But ended up, my dad retired with Hewlett Packard and building silicon. And so you can imagine I went into a computer science program. That was a foregone conclusion. And after a couple years went, I think I'd rather be a rock star. So of course I was playing music this whole time, went to music school, and then I figured out a poor starving musician route is not where I wanted to go. And I never became a rock star. Went into sales, but seriously, along the way, just really began to find that I was gravitating towards, the convergence of go-to-market, revenue, the strategy behind business, as well as then the marketing tactics. And that's how I ended up where I am today.
Awesome. All right. Well, that you are interesting. That's why you're on the show. I love former rock stars.
Hey, well, never was a rock star, but I did get to play. It was fun. I still play today. So,
All right. Case study number one. It's the making of any good B2B drama. It involves a very large buying committee and very long sales cycles, things that are dreaded by some marketers out there. But anyway,
yeah.
I'm excited to hear about this. So take it away.
Yeah. So is quick background. Primarily I work with companies that are selling, really exclusively B2B. These are technology sales. They typically have very long sales cycles. And when I say long, for context, everybody's definition can be different. But 6 months would be blazing fast. I mean, that would be, like unheard of, frankly. A lot of sales cycles can be 12 months to even as long as 24 months. Now, the deal sizes are huge. So, when you get one over the finish line, it can easily be a high 6-figure, even 7-figure annual reoccurring type engagement. So that creates a lot of challenges though, because, navigating, you can imagine the stakeholder count gets pretty high when you're talking deal sizes that large. You have product involved, you have engineering involved, you certainly have finance, you have executive sponsors. There's a lot of people sitting around the table, and keeping everything on track, over 12 to 18, even 24 months is the challenge.
Yeah. So, all right, take us through that beginning of the journey for this company and give us some context about their business.
Yeah. So the business is software, and it's in a very niche, but very critical, and actually it turns out very visible area of video. If you've watched streaming service like, Amazon Prime or Netflix or, Disney Plus or Max, the new HBO service, basically anybody who's streaming video, there's a critical component that's called video encoding. And all that is you take this large video file, you make it smaller, but retain the quality so that then you can watch it on your TV, your iPhone, your whatever device you're on. Now, you can imagine that the integration complexity there is pretty deep. So what ends up happening is that a sales process, there's some of the normal things that you could imagine, like, well, certainly they probably want to see, does it produce good quality? Does it meet some very specific technical requirements? And those hurdles can be cleared, pretty quickly. But it turns out that there is a very long evaluation process. They not only have to assess just the product, does it do what you say it does? Does it work in their environment? But then they often have to integrate it. and do,
Yep.
what's typically called a proof of concept or something that would look like a POC. So this is the challenge, because what ends up happening in this type of a sales cycle is that the business sponsor, or you may think of it as the budget holder, even though it is true, it would be their name that is on the PO. And yes, they have the authority to certainly say, no, we're not going to spend the money, or we're not going to spend the money on solution A, but we're going to go with solution B. But because of the technical complexity, very, very often the old concept, the typical B2B sales concept that I need to get to the buyer, I just need to get to the authority. And that's, the CFO or the CTO or the highest ranking executive. And that's how we're going to win this deal. It doesn't apply. And in fact, generally speaking, it can be, now I'm saying this by rank only, not by importance, but it can be the lowest ranking member on the buying committee who doesn't have the authority to say yes, but 100% can say no. And they will override the senior executive every single time. It's a huge challenge, though, because quite often this person is not visible in the initial vendor meetings. In fact, quite often the challenge is to figure out, okay, who is that person in the account and how do we get to them?
Yeah. Interesting. So
Yeah.
is that by design? Do these companies, are they hiding this unofficial
Ooh, good
decision maker,
question.
or is it no, they're a behind the
Yeah.
scenes tech person, they don't need to be in meetings?
Yeah. And you know what, Steve, that's a great question. I would say that it's different for, culturally in some companies. There are some companies where it's by strategy. And in fact, you go hunting for these individuals, and it's very clear that they are hidden on purpose. You cannot find them.
Yep.
Others, it's just purely in nature. And I would say this is more often the case. It's a nature that, often we're dealing, these are PhDs, these are academics, these are people who are certainly capable and used to talking to vendors, but, it's a different role in the organization. So, yeah, that's where the complexity, comes in.
So how do you get to that person, even though you may not see them?
Yeah.
What are you just saying? We know how they think, therefore all of our content and documentation will be presented in a friendly way. How does that work?
Yeah. So, it's interesting. So, this case study is all about really I would call it the evolution of the way that marketing or marketing ideology worked or used to work, 7, 8, 10 years ago, and the way it works today. So, the idea was, oh, well, this is why we have a product, previously, this is why we have a product marketing team. The product marketing team are sort of one part engineers, one part product people, and one part marketers. They know how to speak the language. Sometimes, you'd hear, that they know how to speak the geek talk, it often be.
Yep.
Although there's an element of that where clearly if you're going to talk to somebody who lives in an incredibly academic environment, they're an engineer, you do want to tailor how you speak to them to their kind of the language. Again, I put that in air quotes, but the language that they would relate to. But it's different than that. And so what the approach now is that, and this is the case study, is that we moved really to solve this dilemma of continuing to come up against buying processes where you would get 50, 60, 70% of the way down the road and then never quite be able to get it closed. And what was the holdup? What was the holdup? And always it came down to suddenly a name popped up, and well, wait a second, who's this person? We've never talked to this person. You'd go look him up and you'd say, oh, well, this is a principal engineer. And they have this certain, description. You're like, well, yeah, I can understand why the name popped up, but now we think we've closed this. And suddenly this person's coming back and asking a whole raft of questions that we should have addressed earlier. So that caused us to really take a radical rethink of how we market. For example, do they care about our brand? And you know what? Sadly, they don't. Does not matter that I've got killer swag that I'm giving out an event. Do they care that I've got the big booth front
That could
and
be
center?
a bad thing. That means
Yeah.
swag dollars not put into the product.
Yeah, 100%. Steve, you're bang on. Now, that doesn't necessarily always get verbalized, but, I have a lot of stories where you would hear like people go, oh, geez, company A over here, it'd sure be nice if they spent that big fancy booth budget on making their product better,
Yeah.
So our normal marketing tactics, like we're just really going to invest in our brand so that when people see our logo, they're going to feel confident, they're going to feel safe, they're going to, that this is a quality product. This person doesn't care about that. This person is not necessarily trolling all of the usual, and I don't mean that in the negative sense. Like troll is probably the wrong word, but they're not on some of the maybe social platforms. They're not in some of the normal places where it's like, yeah, but we're running this great ad campaign. We've got this really cool thing we're doing here. They're not there. Okay. So where are they? Well, this is what's super interesting is that they are self-organizing, and they're self-organizing around communities. And you might say, well, what, like Facebook groups? No, no, maybe, maybe, but set aside, whether it's a LinkedIn group or it's a Facebook group or whether it's just a meetup that they go to once a month of, engineers that are working in the same space that just hang out, drink beer and talk shop. There's a lot of ways this can look, but that is where a lot of the information transfer is happening. And so the big unlock was in 2018 when we had been at this for a couple years and enjoyed some success. There's some video streaming services that you probably and many of the listeners have subscriptions to that utilized and still utilize today our software. And so had success, but we also had enough of these deals that didn't close, where these experts were like, how do we get to them? What do we do? And so we started thinking about what if we started hosting a party? Okay. And the idea it's not a sales event, not at all, because they would bristle at that. But you know what? Everybody likes a good party. Everybody's interested in something. What if we just create a forum for information to be transferred, for people to hang out for, and this is the community aspect. You know what? We're going to draw these people in. We're going to begin to meet them. We're going to learn who they are. They're going to get to know us. And then if at some point we're engaged in a sales process, it's going to be a lot easier to, to push through. So we chose a podcast as the forum to do that. And, some might be like, wow, community. And all of a sudden you're jumping to a podcast. I don't think of podcasts as communities, but let me tell you, in my experience, they are incredible community builders because it gives someone an asynchronous way to interact with you as a person, interact with the company, get a sense of the company, and none of it in a sales way. So we started a podcast called The Video Insiders, and it really was just a hosted series of conversations that were with interesting people doing things in the video industry. We would even talk to competitors. And that might be a little bit of a mind blown for some people. The first time that I presented this to my CEO, who I reported to and worked for, I said, now there's a wrinkle here. And he loved podcasts. So it's like, I didn't have to convince him like the value. But I said, there's one wrinkle. I said, the wrinkle is that we're not going to be dumb about it. We're not just going to invite our competitors on to come take shots at us. But you know what? There's enough co-opetition. And we know in some cases that there are other technologies and other competitive solutions that are being reviewed. So why not be the host of the party? Like, hey, let's invite them on. Let's have a conversation. And it worked like gangbusters. Really, really, really super effective.
Yeah, I have really liked that approach. I mean, even with my own podcast, right? I've had other content marketing agency leaders or owners. And when I always ask myself, should I do this? This is a threat to my company. I really just say, Steve, get over it. Be true to the podcast. Like I'm not doing sales pitches. And I think your point is very valid. It's better to be the host of the party as opposed to like making it such an invite exclusive thing that not everyone is going to, see it that way.
That's right. And what's great about doing that too is that you break down the natural you push through, I guess, is maybe a better way to think about it. Push through but he's a marketer, or this is a marketing thing, or, but it's sponsored by this company. Surely they just want to sell to me. And
It
look,
is.
we all feel that on some level. And I debate with some people say, well, engineers feel it even more. I don't really think that's true because, especially I work largely in Silicon Valley and, the same engineer who will sit there and say, I hate marketing, I hate marketers will go out and get in their brand new fancy whiz bang car that clearly was marketed to them that they bought, some kind. Let's see, how did this work? But the point is that by just facilitating just conversation, like, hey, we're all here to grow the industry. We're here, to really improve your life, bring value to your life meaning, you as an individual working for a company, in this space, doing your job and trying to make your company better. The rewards come back. So maybe I should share with you some of the more tangible outcomes.
Yeah, let's do it. What do we got?
Let's
What were the
do it.
outcomes?
Yeah. Because it's easy to say, hey, it worked like gangbusters, but oh, okay. What does that mean, Mark? So, one of the challenges with a podcast is that even as you grow your downloads, your listenership, your audience, first of all, for a lot of us, the niches and our subject areas are probably pretty small. And so I'm going to give one number that may be a little bit shocking, but I'm doing this on purpose because I think there's this feeling of like, oh, but if I don't get to 5,000 downloads, a week or within some, then it's a failure. On average, we only got 500 downloads in the first 7 days of an episode. Some people might be like, geez, what's the point? Now, bear in mind, this is going to be contextual to your TAM, and I don't even mean the economic TAM. I mean, just, if there are in the whole world 1,000 companies, or even let's say 5,000 companies that really would be in your ICP, well, 500 is 10%, right? That's pretty good coverage if you're reaching 10% every week,
Yep.
So,
Yep.
so just for comparison, but my point in, first of all, sharing that is that it is absolutely about who is listening, not the absolute numbers. And I've said it, if there were 100 of the right people, we would have viewed it as a success. So we got to 500. Now, here's the challenge though, is that you don't have a way to really directly engage them because we also chose not to be really heavy-handed with trying to get email addresses. And so I said, this is great. And we're getting really tremendous anecdotal feedback. Our sales team and going to meetings, it just became automatic. You'd go into the first meeting and somebody in the room, on the customer or the prospect
Yep.
side would say, we love your podcast, I mean, it just became automatic. Like it was weird if it didn't happen. So we knew people were listening. So what we decided to do was build a LinkedIn group. And we we called it, and it's still, it's very active today. And in fact, today there's 3,200 people who have chosen to join. They've requested to join. It's very selective. I don't have it open. I probably reject 3 out of 5 who request to join because I just simply
Yep.
look and it's like they're not even in the industry or they're not, or
Yep.
it's just not a good fit. The point is, this isn't just a vanity group. Now, what does this give us? What it gives us now is a way to message via LinkedIn to these professionals who are the movers and shakers in the streaming video industry. So super valuable. The second tangible outcome is that these things are a little tough to quantify. And I even, we could model higher improvement in this area, but our sales cycle time shrunk by 20%. 20%. Now, when you're talking about a 12-month, maybe an 18-month
Yeah.
sales cycle,
It's
like
huge.
20% is huge. Why is that? Well, because of this affinity. Rather than having to take 1 to 3 meetings for them to, it's almost like kind of feel you out as the vendor, like, well, are you
Yep.
legit? And who are you? They already came in like, hey, we know, like, and trust, going back to
Yep.
these guys.
Yep.
Okay, number 2. Number 3 was that we had at least, and again, these are kind of conservative, but at least a 3x increase in what I considered like our organic distribution of content. And so what does that mean? Well, first of all, we now had a podcast episode that we would cut up and, repurpose. And we just got this, all of a sudden, just this boost, like literally a 3x over our organic content distribution. that's huge because everybody should be focused on that.
Yep.
How can I,
Yep.
how can I get it out there? And then there was absolutely a direct correlation to a revenue increase as a result of a couple factors. One being, sales cycles are shortening. So obviously we have more revenue that's closing in a shorter period. That gave us a very, very nice boost. But generally, just an overall lift in terms of just the market saying, wow, this company is everywhere. I can remember, Steve, one time being at a major trade show, and somebody approached me who I know from the industry. The first thing that he commented was, Mark, congratulations, you guys are everywhere. Now, the funny thing is,
Yes.
still, we're a startup, right? We don't have massive marketing budgets. We were not burning a ton of cash. It's not because the logo was splattered everywhere. It's
Yep.
because of the perception of, it's the podcast and other things, but it largely was driven by the podcast. So,
I want to touch on something you said is the whole know, like, and trust factor. I've been podcasting for 4 or 5 months now, and I've done video series in my business for 26 characters. It is rewarding as a marketer when someone comes to you, raises their hand, and says, "No, let me just give you the context. I've already watched X, Y, and Z. I know
yeah,
this." And it is so much more interesting to sell to those people
that's
because you
right.
don't sell. This truly
That's
is,
right.
all right, they are a buyer. And I just say, you tell me, how can I help? What do you need?
That's right.
And it's amazing how the power of whether it's podcasting or video marketing.
Yeah.
And I think so much of it really is just it's not written,
Yeah.
right? When
Yeah.
you hear people talk, when you hear them tell a story, I would imagine on this podcast, within 5 seconds, people are judging us. Are these people smart? Do they know what they're talking about?
That's right.
And I could write a white paper, and at the end of that white paper, you'd still say, well, I don't know.
I don't know. Yeah.
There were some interesting things in this white paper, but anyone could write it.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
when it's from a human with a talking head, it's all together.
Yeah.
It makes sense to people.
100%. Yeah.
All right, let's do this. That was a great case study. Next time I am on Netflix, I'm gonna refer to that case study.
That's right. There you go.
Let's go to case study number 2. This is
Yeah.
another B2B thing and long sales cycle again. So take us away. Case study number 2.
Yeah. So this one is slightly different, but I really encourage the audience to listen carefully. If you are in a B2B, marketing sales environment, and if you're selling something with a technical component, listen up. Don't click away now. Don't turn it off. Because the background here is that, first of all, it's pretty well known that right now sales cycles are it's just taking longer to close deals anyway. So you compound that with the fact that there's just a lot that goes into making a buying decision when you have a heavy technical component, to the product or the technology, the solution that you're selling. And then just because of the growing B2B buying committee, buying committees are just getting larger. So the problem here is that, due to the specialized nature of the information that's needed, a lot of our traditional marketing approach is like, we have a white paper on that. We have a data sheet. We have some sort of a product brief. We have an application guide. Right. There's kind of these normal, like, well, what else do we produce? Like that's what marketing does. And hey, look how awesome they are. They look really great. They're well designed. The challenge is that 50% of the buying committee, again, going back to the stakeholders, the influencers, the decision makers, are not directly engaged with the vendor. And you're not necessarily going to have an opportunity to sit down and have a conversation, whether it's with this technical individual contributor who is the person who can't say yes, but can definitely say no. You're not going to have an opportunity necessarily to sit down with them and enter into a conversation. They can ask questions and you can bring in an engineer and you can do all this. So the big challenge is, well, what does a marketer do? Because the old idea of like, well, marketing, especially around product marketing, produces product briefs and data sheets and does all these things. Like, that's not sufficient because that doesn't actually answer the question. What the buyers want to know today is, can you solve my problem? Period. That's it. The fact that we're a little bit better, the fact that we're a little bit faster, the fact that we're a lot bit cheaper, we're a little bit cheaper,
Sure.
does not matter. And
Yeah.
regardless of what they tell you, even though they always do buyers will fake us out a lot and fake out sales teams by saying, yeah, we're just going to make a decision based on cost. We're going to make a decision based on quality. We're going to make it. That never is the case. And I just encourage anybody who's saying, really, go back and do a review. Go back and do a review of your last, even just 2 or 3, close loss deals. And if you really do, if you're able to talk to the customers, you're going to find out, yeah, they said it was price, but guess what? That was a factor. That wasn't all of it.
Sure.
So,
Sure. Mark, do me a favor, take a step back and just give us the business context. So
yeah,
give us like the industry,
yeah,
what's the size of the company?
yeah. So this particular case study comes from a company that has built special silicon. Silicon are just the chips that, you might think of them as the processor that's in your computer. That's one version of silicon. There's many different types. This is a piece of purpose-built, not a piece. It's a purpose-built chip. It's silicon that does this video encoding function. So what we talked about in the first case study, someone like a Hulu, like an Amazon Prime, like anybody who's streaming live video, like a Facebook, like a YouTube Live, like a Facebook Live, anybody where you have a camera and then someone on the other end is watching. It could be video conferencing, could be Zoom. All of those require very fast and very efficient video encoding process. And you can just imagine that as the users scale, then this becomes a pretty big challenge. So this company has built this purpose-built silicon, designed it, produced it. Very, very expensive process. And the challenge is that it's not sufficient to kind of take your typical marketing tactics, which is what I, explained as the setup, and just apply those. In other words, like, okay, I'll get some, I'll get the bullets from the engineering team and we'll go create a beautiful looking, data sheet, for example. So how do you solve for this? Because you have to have business understanding and you have to be able to connect, going back to what does the customer really care about? They will say they care about the speed, the performance, the quality of the product. And yes, that has to be validated. There's benchmarks. All that's true. But at the end of the day, what they care about is, do you solve my problem? And so marketers who don't understand what the ecosystem is that the product's going to be used in are going to really struggle here, really struggle a lot, because what will happen is that the content that gets produced can be beautiful. It can look really nice, but it doesn't connect to the ultimate question that buying committee is asking. And that is, does this solve our problem? Period. Whatever that problem is. And so this was something that I saw very, very plainly. Now, I had the advantage personally coming from a technical background. Again, I mentioned, I started programming when I was 12 and taught myself various languages. And, so I am a technical person, but I have spent my entire professional career in sales and marketing. So I never actually, I don't code today is the point. But I learned early on that I needed to become a master of not only the domain, but an understanding, technical understanding of how not only does our product work, but how is it used by the customer. So the case study here and the unlock in terms of really providing a boost in marketing effectiveness is that I doubled down on building, my network by actually learning and by intentionally creating and participating and basically being a salesperson, really effectively. And I have personally, again, working alongside sales in some context, every company, is a little bit different. I wouldn't suggest marketers just go rogue and just start, selling outside of your, normal channels, et cetera. But to the extent that you can go out and directly drive revenue, it does so many things for you. First of all, you have empathy for what the real need is by the buyer, by the customer, and what the problem is they're trying to solve. that then allows you to directly correlate and have a whole different lens to messaging, to positioning, to what you're saying about the product. And I personally haven't experienced this process where I haven't come back and said, oh, wow, we really need to rethink this positioning, or, hey, this sounds really cool what we're saying here. It's totally meaningless, to the
Yep.
buyer. Here's
Yep.
what they really care about.
Yeah. So, all right, fast forward to the part about you hiring a journalist
Yeah.
to
Yeah.
get
Yeah.
through some of this. This is interesting. Go ahead.
Yeah. So, as marketers and as marketing leaders, we're always, I think, being presented with, even though, there's like a common framework, right, into the roles that you might have. And I tend to think that every company is a little bit different. Every market is a little bit different based on the constraints that, we have on either budget or, there can be a lot of different constraints, right? It doesn't necessarily make sense to always do the cookie cutter. Okay, I have these, three generalists who I call marketing managers. Then I have a director of marketing, and then I have a director of comms, and I have this, and it's like, okay, you may have people filling those functions, but the problem is that what ends up typically happening, again, if you're in a more technical environment and if you're in one of these protracted selling and, selling processes, where your sales cycle is 12 to 18 months or longer, is that you end up with marketers who, you look at the content, you're like, hey, that's a great looking white paper. Too bad, like, it's sort of empty calories. I mean, you read it, it's like, all right, it's well written. I mean, but it just doesn't tell me anything. Like, it's not going to move anybody to say, I need to talk to this company. I need to learn about this technology product, et cetera. So the aha was, what if I went to the market and looked for a journalist? What if I found someone who was already writing about the space? By very definition, they're going to at least understand the ecosystem. Even if they're not an expert on the technology aspect of our product, they know very well who the stakeholders are, what the lay of the land is. And that's going to give them a much better framework for positioning and for writing. And so I was fortunate enough to, through relationships that I have, it's another benefit of staying in one particular ecosystem or industry or, market for a long period of time. You kind of, you get to know people. And so I knew of someone who had a tremendous amount of experience, was writing in the area that this company produces products in and then, sells to, and has actually a great brand name individually. And it was an opportunity was presented, which was partially opened up through just one of those casual conversations, right? And the bell went off in my mind, and I went, wow, this could be an amazing fit. We were able to bring him on, and it's been just absolutely incredible because he's able to leverage his name and standing in the industry because people trust him, even though now he's working for a vendor, which the first time in, like 20 years, because he had been an independent freelancer doing his own consulting, writing, for a long, long time. But that wasn't lost. It's not like all of a sudden, oh no, this person's now working for a vendor, I have to look at him different. They're like, no, I'm still consuming his content online. He has his distribution channels, et cetera. And at the same time, he's able to bring that perspective of the customer, which I think is a real key message I don't want to get lost here, is maybe you're not going to be able to go find a journalist to hire onto your team, but you need to find marketers who have lived in the ecosystem, know the environment, can say, hey, I've been on sales calls, I'm on sales calls now. I listen. I know what the customer cares about. I know what they're feeling. So important.
Yep. Yep. Yeah, I think credibility is just a huge part of the marketing process. And anytime you can put your ego to the side as a
Yeah.
marketer, good things can happen. So
Yeah.
thank you for sharing case study number 2. I want to jump right into Q&A.
All right. Let's do
I
it.
know your first job was a coder, maybe doing good things or bad things. I don't know. I hear strange childhood coding stories from a lot of my friends of how they were up to no good at an early age.
No,
And I'm
no, no,
like,
no. I was, and my first job was not coding. I never, no, then remember, this is the Apple II, and I taught myself BASIC. So I wasn't,
okay,
I wasn't exactly hacking the internet. No, interestingly enough, I've heard you ask some of your other guests, what was your first marketing job? This one's a little bit funny. So my first marketing job was for me doing my own marketing. It was a mailed out newsletter. Yes, I mean mailed.
nice. How old are we talking? How old are we talking?
How old? Like the year?
Yeah, no, like how old were you?
Oh, how old? Oh, well, let's see. I was right out of college. I guess I was 26, maybe
Okay.
27, something like that. I mean, I wasn't right. I was a couple years out of college, and I was selling cars. And
From a newsletter.
I built this.
Interesting.
No. I worked at a new Toyota car dealership, and
Okay.
because I had been selling, all through high school, I worked in an Apple reseller. I worked at a hi-fi store. Through college, I managed a car audio. That's basically how I kind of put myself through college. Managed a car audio store, and then I was an assistant manager at a Radio Shack back when Radio Shack was around. So yeah, I had this whole sales thing. But yeah, so I mailed out a newsletter to my customers and to other people who were willing to give me their address. And I'd bring my Apple into my Mac SE, I think I had at the time, set up on my desk,
Yeah.
and when the showroom was not busy, I'd be creating my newsletter.
That's
Seriously,
amazing. What
that's
was the
my first
distribution?
marketing job.
How many people were on the distribution
I
list?
probably like 25. For no, no,
25. All
no,
right.
no, 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 no. I think I got it up to 50 because and not everybody I would sell, I would mail to. I can't even remember all my criteria.
So this was like
Uh,
you were a legit.
uh,
We were speaking about long buying cycles before. I mean, automotive is a pretty.
yeah.
I mean, when you want to buy a car, you're probably buying it in 2 to 3 months. But at least if you're convincing and playing the long game, that's pretty interesting. What would you talk about in the
Yeah,
newsletter?
well, so I remember, and this is like really funny because I do not cook, but I had like a Mark's recipes. So I had Mark's recipes. I had, I think, one article on something like a new Toyota model or some Toyota news, and I sent it out monthly. And by the way, I think I only sent like 3 or 4 of these out. So it's not like I mean 3 or 4 months, that I did it.
Yeah.
I didn't end up, so it wasn't like this is a success, but it's like I look back and I go, wow, I had the vision to say, if I kind of engage with these people and maybe they'll refer me to the concept was that they would tell their neighbor, the neighbor would say, oh, I love
Yeah.
that new Camry. How do you like it? And they'd say, oh, I love it. Hey, you should go talk to Mark. That was the concept. So, yeah.
I love, I love the unorthodoxy there because no one's going to think about doing that. It reminds me of a story of a real estate agent. If I remember the story correctly, they were in California. There was a big garbage strike going on, and there was this standoff with like a local village,
Yeah.
and the garbage just started to pile up and stink for 3, 4, 5 weeks. And a real estate agent who was newer said, you know what, this is my opportunity. I am going to pay for all of this garbage to be removed. So he did that, hired the company, and then that day wrote, a one-page letter to everyone saying, hi, my name is so-and-so. I'm a
Sure.
new real estate agent in town. I care about the community so much that I've just taken all the trash away. I've paid for it. Hopefully this contract gets resolved shortly. But I just love that example is like, think of the brand awareness of a real estate agent that you didn't know. And
That's
now you
right.
know, and now you're probably going to take him out and buy him a coffee
That's
for
right.
doing it.
Well, it's that affinity, and it goes back to even talking about community, in the case study, the first case study. Like, we're trying to just build affinity. I actually hate the term B2B because it's not business to business, it's human to human, it's H to H. At the end of the day, I don't go to my office or people work virtually now, but I'm not at work making a decision and somehow I flip into this different, dispassionate, totally disconnected mindset. Like I'm
Yep.
still human, right? So I'm talking to this guy, Steve, who I think can help me. And I like Steve. He seems like a good guy. He seems pretty smart too. you know what? I think Steve can help us, right? That's how it goes. It's not, this disconnected. So, and yet
Yep.
sometimes, our strategies and tactics treat it like Steve is this disconnected, entity that, we're marketing to. And it's like, no, it's Steve's a human.
By the way, I'm laughing because it reminds me. I have to tell a personal story now. This is a long time ago. I worked at an agency, and I was going in front of a really big retailer, and it was essentially a buying committee, and
Mhm.
I was one of probably 15 vendors
Oh
that
yeah.
day that was asked to come in and give us a 20-minute pitch about who you are. Someone at the company introduces me. I start presentation. No one is looking at me. Like there is zero eye contact, and I'm just going like, "What's going on here?"
Yeah.
Like my delivery is off. I need to like reset.
Yeah.
And it was funny. It was the most awkward 20 minutes. And then afterwards, the host of the meeting took me aside and he's like, "Don't worry, they don't make eye contact on purpose. They don't want to be attached to the presenter because like this is all they do. And as soon as they have a connection,
Yeah.
they feel like they're gonna be kind of swayed one way or the other." And I was just like, "Oh my god, that's
That's
fascinating." It's
bizarre.
like
Yeah.
it's like they went to the poker conference on how
Yeah.
to have your poker face up the whole meeting.
And
Don't make eye contact. Don't let them see.
they should have at
Don't
least
don't let them
all
know you're
worn
listening.
dark sunglasses so they could at least be
Yeah.
looking at you and not seeing the eye. But I guess the point was they didn't want to see you, not the other way around. But anyway,
It
that's
was the
funny.
most bizarre thing. Anyway,
That's bizarre.
total segue. All right, another question for you.
Yeah.
What's one thing looking back that you've really you didn't get at the time, but now you have clarity on as it relates to like your own growth as a marketer? What do you look back and learn from?
Wow. There's a lot, but this is the one that I routinely talk to people about, remind them about, and say, do this. One more growth hacking trick is not what you need. Learn business.
I thought you were going to share the one more
No,
perfect growth hacking
no,
trick. I was really listening.
no. Learn business. Learn your
Yeah.
business. I find way, way, way too many marketers who their head is full of incredible knowledge about, all kinds of, gray and white hat SEO techniques. And I mean, just go
Yeah.
down the list, right? And look, all of that is needed. But the problem is that there's often this feeling of like, I need one more, I need to attend one more webinar, I need to buy one more tool. I need, I need, and then we're going to be successful. And I routinely, just last week, I was having a conversation with a marketing director, and I made the observation, it'd be too long and involved to go into the whole detail, but I made the observation of like, you don't need to implement that whole program. Why don't you just get on the phone and call a few customers? And this person's response was like, well, I'm not sales. And I said, but you're talking about implementing this whole long process to drive revenue when I'm telling you, I can make that happen in probably the next hour by just getting on the phone.
Yeah. Yeah.
And there was that pregnant pause of like, that sunk in what I just said. They were going to implement a 30-day program that's going to cost money, be incredibly labor intensive. And there was no arguing that somebody could have gotten on the phone and in 1 hour achieved nearly the same result.
Yeah. Yeah.
So,
That's great insight. I think that marketers do just get caught up in call it the marketing bunker, that place we all
mhm,
go to, and it's strategy, it's marketing shop, but there's nothing like just a good old, hey, go talk to someone, go pick up a phone, or even if you can't get to your customer, someone in the industry that you can at least say, hey, what do you think a person in this role cares about?
yeah,
And
yeah,
I think we just make that mistake so many times is, oh, that's not our job.
yeah,
That's
yeah.
that's tricky because now I may have to ask
Mhm.
permission, or,
Sure.
and a lot of times the Salesforce, it's their book of business, and they
Mhm.
don't, right or wrong, in their perspective, they don't want people messing with it. I remember I was talking to a salesperson once. I was asked to go out as part of it was like some client entertainment, and I was the marketing guy
Uh,
that got asked to join.
yeah,
And we were just doing a Salesforce migration, and the leader of the company was making a big push to say like, salespeople, I need your information in Salesforce.
Yeah.
And this one salesperson I was talking to just said, here's my book. He literally showed me the book of all his notes and his contacts. And he goes, I'm not putting it in Salesforce. And, we just had a great conversation about why he wasn't going to do it. And that insight right there changed the whole perspective on the whole program of how do you make it happen?
Yeah.
And, had nothing to do with the technical implementation of it.
Yeah.
It's a culture thing. And ultimately it's a CEO decision.
That's right.
Are you going to force this or not?
Yeah.
Because if you've got no teeth behind mandating it, it ain't going to happen.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah, there's just real good conversations are way more productive.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure.
Well, Mark, I've enjoyed having you on the show. I think you've got a really cool background and love that you're living in tech. I wish I got into tech sooner because it is a very sexy category for me. Although I was very early on, I was in tech before it was a thing because I was in the satellite business.
Oh, yeah. Okay.
I started at U.S. Satellite Broadcasting, which became DirecTV.
Yeah.
And at the time, that was like a very sexy new technology. We were launching satellites.
That's right.
We were taking down cable. And for my 2 years or so working at that company, I felt like it was cutting edge technology. So it's fun to be in that part of the world.
It is fun. Yeah. Well, it's been great talking with you, Steve, and really appreciate the opportunity. I hope some of the insights shared are useful or will be useful to your audience.
Yeah. All right. Well, thanks again, Mark. And thank you to all the listeners who joined us again for another episode of Interesting B2B Marketers. Until next time, take care, everyone. See ya.
Thanks for tuning in to the Interesting B2B Marketers podcast. Be sure to subscribe wherever you heard this podcast so you never miss an episode. If you found value in today's episode, please help grow the podcast by sharing with others and leaving a review. We'll see you next time.